In this video, I spent 100 days in Terraria's Calamity mod, and this is what happened. Calamity is by far the most popular Terraria mod, adding thousands of new items and weapons and tons of insane bosses, and 2 new difficulties, Revengeance and Death mode, but we'll only be focusing on Revengeance on a Master mode world, and for my class I'll be playing as a summoner. And with that, hope you guys enjoy.
You idiot! Like, let me zoom it out! Stop! Wow! Finally! This man just called me a child. I'm not about to take that disrespect.
Day 1 of spawning in, open our treasure bag, mine some trees, and clear out the land from my house. Also planning on improving my build in this playthrough. I then remembered to activate Revengeance mode. After that, I made my way to the left of the world where I found an aglet and another summon to help us. And after that, I found our first Calamity enemy, a Wolfram drone. And when you kill it, they drop Wolfram scrap. And you can use this to craft a ton of summoner items. After making my way back, it had turned night, and since I recorded this near Halloween, enemies can drop goodie bags, and I got a Ninja Turtle set, which looked pretty cool. I then found a cave with a heart crystal, and before I died, I teleported home. I started day 2 by making some pumpkin armor, which gave 7 defense and 10% more damage. Also, since I'm playing in Master mode, enemies do a lot of damage, so any defense we get really helps. After killing another Wolfram enemy, I found a Wolfram battery, which gave a 7% damage increase to summons, and a 50% chance to get an extra piece of scrap when I killed a Wolfram enemy. This was really helpful early on. And after that, I had my first death and died to explosives. I then went back and found another heart crystal and died again, and using the amethyst I got, I made a grappling hook. Day 3 I spent mostly caving, and my goal is to find Hermes boots. After dying, I went home, and using the Wolfram scrap we had, I made our first whip, the Wolfram chain, and it was okay for now. I also made a lucky horseshoe and a platinum pickaxe. And also found out that Calamity has a recipe to where you can make heart crystals, so I made 5 of them. I then went to the desert and I found a pyramid, and inside of it I found a magic carpet. I then found our next Calamity enemy called a Storm Lion, and after killing it, it dropped me a Stormjaw staff, which basically summoned a mini Storm Lion to fight for me. And with the rest of the Wolfram scrap we had, I made a full set of Wolfram armor. And after heading back home, using the materials we found, I made a Sun Spirit staff, which basically summoned a mini Sun of your head that shot enemies. After that, I started work on an arena. Day 6 I made a summon for King Slime in the Eye of Cthulhu, and after returning home, I decided to fight King Slime, and this is how it went. For the entire day. Yeah, I don't know, he was just really quick, and not having any Hermes boots did not help either. Most of day 7 was spent looking for Dunarda boots, but luckily Calamity has a recipe where you can craft Hermes boots, so after finding a loom, we did that instead. Now having Hermes boots, I decided to fight King Slime again, and it went horrible. I even tried an attempt at Eye of Cthulhu, and it was not any better. So I decided to upgrade. I first started by going to the jungle to make our next whip, the Snapthorn. And for this we need 15 stingers, 3 vines, and 12 jungle spores. And after about 30 minutes of farming, we got all the materials we needed. And with that, I headed home and made the Snapthorn, and we got godly on it. And after looking at the recipes, I saw we could make a new summon called the Belladonna Spirit Staff. And with the leftover materials I had from the jungle, I quickly made it. And it spawns in these little minions that basically just shoot poison at enemies. And this did a lot of damage. The rest of day 10 was spent fighting King Slime, and even with all these upgrades, I was still struggling. And day 11, I spent the entire day fighting him, and I still couldn't kill him.
I just get stuck on something.
This was my best attempt yet, so I was getting very frustrated. Day 12 was mostly spent trying to craft a cloud in a bottle, and instead of telling you every time Calamity adds a new recipe for a vanilla item, I'll just tell you now that basically Calamity adds tons of crafting recipes for a bunch of vanilla items that you would normally not be able to craft. And I'll show a list here, and the list goes on, and this saves so much time. One of the materials we needed for crafting the cloud in the bottle was feathers, so after drinking a gravitation potion, I headed to the skies. And as we got up there, we found these new little planetoids that Calamity adds, which are basically just mini planets. And you can get tons of loot in here, such as ores, heart crystals, and chests. At one point, even found an enchanted sword. After a bit more of exploring, I found a crimson island with a crimson chest in the middle, but it couldn't be opened to a killed Plantera. We also needed a crimson key, and after collecting all the materials we needed, I went back home and I made the cloud in the bottle. Now for the rest of day 12, all the way until the nighttime of day 14 was all spent fighting King Slime, and this was pure misery.
What is hitting me? Genuinely!
And you probably noticed I haven't been explaining why I've been struggling with him, and the reason is I feel like it'd be better for me to describe how the boss fight goes on the attempt I actually killed him. So, here you go. The fight starts off pretty normal. He starts out by dashing at you and summoning slimes, the basics. But once you get him to about half HP, he summons this green little gem, and this thing was so hard to dodge. And later in the fight, he summons a red one that shoots lasers at you, and eventually he summons a purple one. And this on top of the slimes he already spawns made it so hard to fight him. But after about 66 attempts, we finally did it.
Get out of here. Yes! Oh my gosh, let's go!
Real quickly, that robot suit you saw me in is basically an ability my armor gives me. If I double tap down, it encases me in wolfram scrap. It also costs 1 wolfram scrap to use, and it gives me like 20 defense and a laser gun. And it still is technically a summoner damage, so I could use it. And this was so helpful during the fight. Honestly, I don't know if I would have killed him without this. In terms of drops, all we get from him is the slimy saddle, which helps us go down the elevator faster when we make one, and his relic, which looks pretty cool. Each boss drops a lore item, but I forgot to pick King Slimes up, so I'll put it on screen so you can read. And these get more interesting as we go on. I then tried another attempt at the Eye of Cthulhu, and actually got it to half health. But then I died. For the rest of day 14, I spent working on the magic storage, which is basically a quality of life mod that adds this whole new storage system, which is so much better than the normal one. And on day 15, I finished it. And the rest of day 15 and some of day 16 were spent building. Honestly, I'm not really sure what I was going for, but I was honestly just kind of free building. But trust me, I make a way better base later on. And in general, this video will get way better on as we go. We're only just starting out, I promise this is going to get better. While I was trying to build, a slime rain started, and King Slime summoned again, so I had to go through dying to him again. I then spent the rest of day 16 in the desert trying to find a sandstorm in the bottle. Day 17 I found a really cool spirit lamp altar, and inside of it had this accessory called the Luxor's Gift, and depending on your damage type it will give you a different summon. And since I'm summoner, I get a green hieroglyph, which dashes into enemies. And after continuing to explore, I found the first Calamity biome, the Sunken Sea. And this is basically, well, a Sunken Sea. It adds a bunch of cool new mobs and things like that, but we'll be coming back here later, so we don't have to worry about this right now. And since our inventory is full, we had to unfortunately head home. And I actually brought the desert altar back to my base and recreated it, and it actually looked really cool. Day 18, I made a storage crafting interface, which basically connects to your magic storage, and you can put all your crafting stations in there so you can craft everything you need super easily. I then made a balloon and a blizzard in a bottle. After that, I went to the desert and quickly set up arena for our first Calamity boss. And after using our desert medallion, we summoned the Desert Scourge. And we spent the rest of day 18 all the way to the nighttime of day 19 fighting him. And I don't know, we just kept losing, and it was honestly pretty frustrating. So later that night, I decided to try to fight the Eye of Cthulhu again, and here's how this went. After getting slammed, I went back to the Sunken Sea, and I was in search of a mini-boss called the Giant Flame, and you can get some pretty good items from him. But there's one problem. He doesn't spawn in until after you kill the Desert Scourge, and this was a problem. I was having trouble in the Desert Scourge, and I was having trouble in the Eye of Cthulhu. I don't know, I was feeling kind of stuck right now, and yeah, this kind of sucked. The rest of day 20 and most of day 21 were spent fighting the Eye of Cthulhu and Desert Scourge, and for the life of me, I could not kill them. So for most of day 22, I just spent building. And later that night, I summoned the Eye of Cthulhu, and I fought the Eye of Cthulhu for one last time. And here's what happened.
Let's go, I killed him. I killed him having to use nurse heals, but I did it, bro. Oh my gosh, let's freaking go, dude.
And we did it. We killed the Eye of Cthulhu. And I put his lore on screen if you want to read it. Also forgot to mention, but sometime during day 22, we found an accessory called the Rover Drive, which you get from Wolfram enemies. And basically, every 10 seconds, it charges up a shield that tanks 20 damage and also gives you 10 defense, so this was very helpful during the fight. And also at some point, I made a elevator. And using the Demonite bars we got from the Eye of Cthulhu, I was able to make an accessory called the Magna Lumens, which basically just made me faster. Also gave me a little light. Also, since we killed the Eye of Cthulhu, we now have the Alchemist and the Brewer move in. And basically, they sold me potions. And later that night, we summoned a Goblin army. And after that, I went to search for a Goblin Tinkerer, and we found him almost instantly. So I bought a Tinkerer workshop from him and a pair of rocket boots. And after returning home, I made a yellow horseshoe balloon and lightning boots. Feeling confident in my gear, I headed to the desert and summoned the Desert Scourge. And this is how the fight went. So the fight starts off pretty simple with the worm dashing at the player and occasionally launching sand projectiles. But halfway through the fight, he summons 2 mini worms. And for this phase, you have to lock in. And eventually I beat them.
Dialed. We killed one. Oh my gosh. It's just a big one. Come on. No, I can't choke. I can't choke out. Oh my god!
We did it. We killed the Desert Scourge after about 20 attempts. And honestly, I really like this fight. It's pretty cool to get to fight him early on. He's probably one of my favorite pre-Hardmode bosses. And for his drops, we get a new summon called the Brittle Star Staff, which summons a mini starfish. And right-clicking causes them to stop attacking and circle you. And for each starfish you have, you get 3 defense. Now that we killed the Desert Scourge, the giant clam could spawn in. So after quickly making my way to the Sunken Sea and a few minutes of waiting, we finally had one spawn in. And for the fight, it's pretty simple. The clam kind of just sits there idly, and occasionally he tries to stomp on the player, but after a couple of minutes he goes down. After killing the giant clam, we get a new NPC called Amidius, who sells underwater themed summon items, including a whip. And after buying all of them, I teleported home. And to be honest, the whip was pretty mid. I then headed to the blue mushroom biome to quickly set up an arena for our next boss, Crabulon. And this boss has one of my favorite soundtracks in the game. But I died. Before fighting him again, I decided to expand our arena. And after summoning him again, this is what happened. Now for the fight, Crabulon's pretty simple. He basically just jumps at the player and launches projectiles. But overall, it's a pretty simple fight. And we traded. Overall, pretty fun fight. Pretty simple, nothing too crazy, and here's the lore if you want to read it. Now in terms of drops, we get an item called the Mushroom Plasma Root, which permanently increases the duration of Rage Mode by 1 second. And the Rage meter is a mechanic added in Revenge Mode along with the Adrenaline meter. And once both of these bars full up completely, you get a massive damage boost. I then went to go fight the giant clam for a summon that I thought we can get now, but you can only get in hard mode. And while fighting him, I got a message saying a toxic downpour falls over the wasteland seas. And this basically means that an acid rain event is going on, which is basically Calamity's version of the Goblin army. And after quickly heading back home, I grabbed my magic conch and we headed to the Sulphurous Sea, a new biome added by Calamity. And this is one of my favorite biomes in the entire game. It even has a great soundtrack. Halfway through the event, I killed an enemy and got a weapon called the Caustic Croaker Staff, which basically summoned a little toad that exploded. And not gonna lie, this was pretty mid. I then went to the Sky Islands to mine a new Org Calamity adds called Aerolite, but we can't mine it until we kill a certain boss. After that, I went back to the Sulphurous Seas and I went to finish the Acid Rain event. And by the time we finished it, it turned nighttime. So I went to the dungeon, quickly set up an arena, and we tried to fight Skeletron. I got dookied on. I then saw a new whip we can craft called the Static Scourge, and to craft this we needed Stormline Manimals and Sea Remains. And while I was in the Sunken Sea farming all the items we needed, I got an item called the Voltic Jelly, which gave us one more max minion, and minions now inflict Electrified. I then went to the Corruption and broke 3 Shadow Orbs, and it summoned 4 Eater of Worlds. This caught me off guard so badly. I then came back and set up a proper arena, and on day 27, this happened. And we did it. We killed the Eater of Worlds. Honestly, not too much to say about this fight. It's basically the normal fight, except there's just 4 of them, and it's pretty satisfying using the whip. And he has 2 lore items, so I'll put them both up on screen. And since you fight 4 Eater of Worlds, you get so many Shadow Scales and Demonite ore. When I got home, I made a Vile Feeder, which summons a baby Eater of Souls to protect you. I also made a Nightmare Pickaxe and a Corrupt Flask, which gives 4% damage reduction and 6 defense in the Corruption. And considering our next boss was going to be in the Corruption, this was very useful. I then went to the Corruption to summon our next boss, the Hive Mind, which you summon in by destroying a Hive Tumor. And this boss looked nasty. And not gonna lie, for the next 2 days, I really struggled with this boss. Okay, I got sold. I mean, like... Before my sanity completely drained, I made the Static Scourge Whip, and this thing attacked insanely fast. The only downside to it was pretty short. I then came back to the Corruption and made my arena bigger. And this still didn't help. But me being the Chad I am, I kept trying. I then went to the dungeon, expanded my arena, and refought Skeletron, and this is how it went. I then let my pride down and decided to go upgrade. I first started by buying an obsidian skin, then heading to the underworld to mine hellstone. And after collecting over 1,000 hellstone, we headed back. And using the hellstone bars, we made a molten pickaxe and an imp staff. I also made a cinder blossom staff, which was basically an upgrade to the sun spirit staff. I then tried the hive mind again, and honestly, I was feeling really stuck at this point. I couldn't really get any more upgrades, and I just couldn't seem to kill the hive mind or Skeletron. So I looked up a guide, and in the guide, they're using obsidian armor, the best summoner armor set in pre-Hardmode. And I was so focused on calamity items that I completely forgot about it. So I got the full set, but for some reason, my recording stopped. This obsidian armor set was so much better than the Wolfram armor set. To start off, you get an extra minion than the other one, and also you get way more defense. And one of the best parts about it is that your whip is way faster and way bigger. And after a few more attempts, this finally happened.
my world. Welcome to my world.
Oh, we did it. I didn't count exactly, but I'm pretty sure this boss took upwards of like 35 tries. Honestly, I really enjoyed the fight. It just kind of sucked that I forgot about the obsidian armor, because honestly, if I had that, it would have made it way easier from the start. Now for his drops, we get an accessory called the Rotten Brain, which below 75% health, give you a 10% damage increase, and also shade rains down whenever you're hit. We also got a dank staff, which summons a dank creeper to fight for you. I started day 33 off by making a mini king slime, which I thought looked pretty cool. And now since we killed the hive mine, we can mine aerolite ore. So I headed to the skies and started mining some. And after turning it into bars and looking in the recipe browser, I saw we can make a ton of new items. And the main thing that caught my eyes was the new armor set and a pair of wings. So I went searching for an island with more aerolite, and I found one with tons of it. And after heading back, I made a pair of aerolite wings. I then tried another attempt at Skeletron, but failed. So after dying, I went back and made a new accessory called the Spirit Glyph, which basically gave you a random buff every time your summons hit an enemy. I also made Aerospec armor, and the set bonus summons a Valkyrie to fight for you. It also gave me more damage, an extra minion slot, it shot feathers whenever I was hit, and it also let you fall down quicker. After that, I made a bundle of horseshoe balloons and a harpy ring, which gave me increased movement speed and increased my maximum flight time by 20%. And after heading to our arena and using the overloaded sludge, we summoned our next boss, the Slime Gods. And this by far has one of the best boss soundtracks in the game.
Oh my gosh, come on! Oh my gosh, what's next? Let's go, dude!
This was definitely one of the best pre-Hardmode bosses, and by far my favorite part about this was the music. Now for the drops, we get an item called the Electrolyte Gel Pack, which permanently increases Adrenaline mode damage by 20% and damage reduction by 5%. They also dropped a new material called Purified Gel, and using this we're able to upgrade our Velatic Jelly into a Jelly Charged Battery. I also got a new summon from them called the Crim Slime Staff, but it seemed pretty mid, so I didn't use it. I then made two new whips called the Sky Splitter, which restored flight time, and the Congeal Duo Whip, which had less base damage, but hit two whips at the same time. And using my 3 brain cells, I figured that the Congeal Duo Whip would be better, so I ended up using it instead of the other one. It also sounded funny. I then went to the dungeon and summoned Skeletron for one last time. The only real changes to the fight that Calamity adds is that he shoots skulls from the start, and also every now and then he teleports and shoots more skulls at you, but I'll just let the fight play. Also, forgot to mention, halfway during the fight, he regrows his hands, which is just so awesome, bro.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, let's go, dude. Oh, they're so difficult, bro. And that's the fight. I mean, it's Skeletron. Not too much to say, just now he shoots more skulls at me. And the only thing we got from Skeletron that really mattered to me was his pet. I then wanted to make a full set of Stagil armor, but we didn't have enough Purified Gel, so I had to refight the Slime God. I then remembered to buy the Counter Scarf, which is basically an upgraded dash. Now having the materials from the Slime God, I made the full set of Stagil armor. This armor had more defense and a lot of helpful abilities, but it had a huge increase in damage, so I decided to stick with the Aerospec armor. After that, I looked and saw we could make a new whip called the Spinal Tap, so I headed to the dungeon to farm all the materials we needed. Also, while I'm down here, I was farming for an item called the Staff of Necrosteocytes, and combining this with the Vile Feeder, the Belladonna Spirit Staff, and the Imp Staff, we can make a new summon called the Eye of Night. And after a while, we finally got it. And after returning home, I made the Eye of Night, which was cool, I guess. I then bought all the accessories I needed for the Terraspark boots, and then made the Terraspark boots. Also, at some point, I made the Spinal Tap whip, which did more damage than my other two whips, and it said it was better against multiple targets than most whips. After that, I went to the jungle, and I used an item called a City Buster, which basically clears out a giant chunk of blocks, but it basically sets my PC on fire. And after quickly setting up an arena, we fought Queen Bee, and we did so much damage. Nice, bro. And we did it. We killed Queen Bee. And honestly, that was one of my favorite fights so far. She has a really fun moveset to dodge, and honestly, just overall pretty fun fight. But in terms of drops, we don't get anything useful from her. I then went to the snow biome and some of the deer glops. And yeah, that's the fight. He doesn't have a lore item, that's kind of it. None of his drops are too good, and yeah, I don't know. Deerclops always hasn't been my favorite boss. But that just leaves us with one boss until hard mode. I then spent the next few days working on an arena for the Wall of Flesh, and having to clear out buildings and deal with all the enemies made this super tedious. After I finished the arena, I tried an attempt at the Wall of Flesh, and this happened. I then decided to switch back to Obsidian armor for the increased whip range and speed. I also bought a pair of Ferret Claws for even more whip speed. After that, I went to the Sulphurous Sea to look for a new summon called the Herring Staff, which spawns in chests and a new biome added by Calamity below the Sulphurous Sea called the Murky Waters. And eventually, it leads up to the Abyss, which is an entire underwater area you can explore with colossal squids and all kinds of stuff like that. Also, while I was down there, I found an accessory called Ancoic Plating, which made it more difficult for Abyss creatures to detect you and reduced the defense reduction that the Abyss causes. When I got back home, I used the Herring Staff and saw that each time you used it, it spawned in 3 fish. So this basically gave me 12 summons. I also bought 30 of a bunch of potions to have all the effects add up. Now having all these upgrades, I decided to refight the Wall of Flesh. And I did better, but I still ended up dying. The next few days were all spent on the Wall of Flesh, and I just kept dying over and over and over. I even made a base down here, so if I died, I can keep respawning. Eventually, I made an item called a double obsidian insta-bridge, which basically put 2 obsidian bridges across my entire world. And since they're obsidian, they couldn't be burned by the mobs anymore. And after a few more deaths, I summoned the Wall of Flesh for one last time. And this is what happened.
Come on.
Yeah! Oh my god, let's go, dude!
And with that, we're officially in hard mode. Now before I get into everything that hard mode adds, I'd like to say that from this point on, the overall pace of the video will pick up a ton, as we just unlocked a ton of new things. Also, since the difficulty absolutely spikes, I've decided to add a new mechanic of my own called the sanity meter, which basically will show you how sane I was in the moment. Spoiler alert, I was not sane at all during hard mode. After killing the wall of flesh, we got a message saying that the Sunken Sea trembles, which basically means that the Sunken Sea enemies have now been buffed. I also got the classic messages you normally get, and a new one saying a star has fallen from the heavens, which is referring to a new biome added by Calamity that we'll find later. And before I forget, here's the lore. For his drops, I got a new mount called a goat skull, which basically lets you ride a goat. Now from his treasure bag, we got a new whip called the Firecracker, which exploded when you hit enemies. We also got a demon heart, which gives you an extra accessory slot. And lastly, we got a black hawk remote, which summoned jets to fight for you, but for some reason they needed ammo and I was too lazy to buy it, so we didn't end up using it. While I was exploring, I found the astral biome, and this place looked beautiful, but we didn't have a reason to go here right now, so we ended up leaving. I then went to the Sunken Sea to try to get the new items that the giant clam dropped, but still using mostly pre-hardmode gear, we got absolutely destroyed. I then went to the spider biome so we can farm spider fangs and make a new armor set and a new summon. And after about 15 minutes, we got all the spider fangs we needed. And after heading back, we made the full spider set and a spider summon. And this armor set gave us 2 extra summons, so we can now have up to 9 summons. Now my next goal is to get a pair of wings, so I went up to the sky and almost instantly a wyvern spawned in. I was still missing the souls of flight we needed, but using an NPC, I bought a summon for it and we killed it. I then looked at all the wings we can make, and I saw the pixie wings, and not only did they have the most flight, they also gave you 60 max life. And after buying all the pixie dust we needed, I made the pixie wings. Before I forget, I need to mention that Calamity changes the hard mode ore progression. Normally you'd have to break the demon altars for the ore to spawn in, but now the ores spawn in after every mech boss you kill. So the only ore we have now is cobalt and palladium. And when I got home, I made a palladium pickaxe. I then tried a few attempts at queen slime, but I failed. Also, quick update on the sanity meter. Good, I'm sane right now. I then spent a while in the snow biome looking for an enemy called the Ice Clasper, which dropped a new summon called the Ancient Ice Chunk. And after a while, we finally got one to spawn. And these summons were crazy. With all my new gear, I went back to the Sunken Sea to refight the giant clam. And since we're in hard mode now, the fight's different. And honestly, it's way more fun now. But he easily goes down. And he dropped the summon we needed. And the summon he dropped was a shellfish, which spawned a little clam that stuck onto enemies and did a ton of damage. And using the materials he dropped, I made a new summon called the Prison Break. And this did a ton of damage, and your summons released crystals when they attacked. Feeling more than confident with all my new gear, I tried to fight Queen Slime again, and I died. After that, I summoned her again, and I beat her. And honestly, not too much to say about this boss fight. I couldn't tell if there's any new changes. And here's her lore. I then spent the rest of the night fighting the twins, and it went about how you'd expect. After that, I made the Cryo Key. And after setting up an arena in the snow biome, we summoned our next boss, Cryogen, who is basically just a giant ice crystal, and unfortunately we died to him. I then spent the rest of the night dying to the twins over and over again. And at this point, my sanity was starting to drop. The next day, I went to the snow biome to look for an ice golem, and after finding one and killing it, it dropped a frost core. I then went to the desert to farm for souls of night, and while I was there, I found an earth elemental. And after killing it, it dropped a melee weapon called the Aftershock. When I got home, I made an accessory called Crystallized Lodestone, which made your whips release boulders, give you 8 defense when a whip hit, and a bunch of underground buffs. I also made another accessory called Honeydew, which gave you 30 max life, increased life regen, and reduced how long you had sickness debuffs. And using the Frost Core, I made the Cool Whip. And after a few more attempts on Cryogen, I summoned Cryogen for one last time. And this is what happened. Cryogen first starts off in a hard shell, and after you break it, he gets faster and starts releasing more projectiles. And randomly throughout the fight, he regrows his shell. And eventually he summons these ice balls that spawn out more projectiles.
And just like that, Crabulon's dead. Honestly, a pretty solid early hard mode boss, but for some reason he doesn't have a lore item. And from killing Crabulon, we get a new NPC called Permafrost, who sold a bunch of ice-themed weapons. And from his bag we got Crabulon wings, but the current wings we had were better. I then decided to farm for a summoner emblem, and it took so many tries to kill the wall of flesh again. And finally, after killing him, he didn't drop it. And after some more farming and deaths, we finally got it. And this gave us a 15% increase in damage. I then kidnapped a human being and made a DPS meter. I then saw we could fight a new boss called the Aquatic Scourge. And after making the summon, I headed to the Sulphurous seas to fight him. Now, if you couldn't already tell, the Aquatic Scourge is basically just the water version of the Desert Scourge. But in terms of attacks, he was completely different. Like focusing a lot more on projectiles and dashing at the player. But for some reason, I kept choking and it was making me really mad.
Oh my gosh.
Wow!
I died to the steam! Yeah, at this point my sanity was really low. But after locking in, we finally killed him. And that's the Aquatic Scourge. Honestly, not too crazy, doesn't do anything too special, just kind of a different version of the Desert Scourge. For drops, we didn't get anything too important, but after killing him, a tier 2 acid rain event starts. And after putting my items away, I headed back to the Sulphurous Sea to do the event. Enemies were now dropping a new material called Corrosive Fossil, which we can use to craft a bunch of new items. After I finished the event, I headed home and waited for it to turn nighttime. And the next 2 days were all spent on the twins. And honestly, I feel like I can never beat them. So I started building. For all my playthroughs, I always build my base in the forest biome, and I was ready for a change. So I decided to build my base in the Sulphurous Sea. I already really enjoyed the music and the vibe, so I thought it'd be the perfect place. I first started by chopping down trees and clearing out the land. After clearing out the land, it had turned night, so I headed home to fight the destroyer, and this is what happened. After that, I started looking at blocks we can use for a house, and one caught my eye called Smooth Navy Stone. So after crafting 1,000, I went back to building. After clearing the platforms, I started working on the house itself. And what I had in mind for a base was a big, spiky, conch shell kind of thing. Real quickly, for the next few days were spent on building, and at nighttime, we'd fight the mechs. But I think it'd be pretty boring if I showed you every single time I died to the mechs, so we're just going to focus on building for now. And now I'll let the building montage roll. Eventually I took a break from building to turn my old house into a graveyard biome so I could buy crimson seeds from the dryad. And after using an instavator, I cleared out a huge chunk of space using the city buster. And using the crimson seeds I bought before, I turned this place into an underground crimson biome. And while waiting for it to grow, I went back to building.
And with that, I finished the house, and honestly, I was really happy how it turned out. I then spent the next night fighting the Destroyer, and I had an attempt where I got him to 13%, so I knew I can kill him. It was just a matter of attempts. I then checked up on the Crimson biome, and it had completely turned into a full Crimson biome. And the reason I made this into a Crimson biome is because I was looking for an accessory called Flesh Knuckles, which dropped from Crimson Mimics. After having no luck, I returned home to fight the Destroyer, and I actually beat him. And honestly, our damage was fine, it was just we were so squishy. Also, at some point, I bought the Rod of Discord from the Wizard. I just don't feel like scrubbing through the footage to find it. And it helped me a lot during the fight. Oh my gosh.
We did it! We did it! Yes!
I then went back to farming for the Flesh Knuckles, but I still had no luck. And eventually I remembered that Orichalcum and Mithril now spawn in our world, so I went to go mine it. After having enough resources, I teleported home, made a Mithril Anvil, and a Tundra Flame Blossom Staff, which was a new summon that spawned flowers over me. After that, I tried a couple more attempts at the twins, and you can guess how it went. After that, I made a Mithril Pickaxe and went to the Brimstone Crag Biome to farm Essences of Havoc. I was also able to mine this new material called Infernal Suvite using our Mithril Pickaxe. And after returning home, I was able to use the Infernal Suvite to create a new material called Unholy Cores. And using the Unholy Cores, I was able to make the Igneous Altation and the Charred Idol, the summon for our next boss. And the Igneous Altation summoned blades around the player, and when you right-clicked, it launched them. And after heading back to the Brimstone Crag Biome, we summoned our next boss, the Brimstone Elemental. And unfortunately, we died a few times, but on our 5th attempt, we killed her. And the fight starts off pretty simple with her just chasing the player and occasionally launching projectiles and teleporting around. But eventually, she goes into a hardened shell and starts launching clusters of projectiles. Okay, now I'm gonna shut up and start the fight play. Come on, finish her, finish her. Nice, let's go, dude. From our drops, we got a summon called Dormant Brimseeker, a Rosestone which summoned a Brimstone Elemental to fight for us, and a Parry. And after the next few days, we were all spent on the twins, and not gonna lie, I was struggling a lot. But the new summons I got were definitely helping a lot. And not gonna lie, up until this point, I was feeling really stuck and I wasn't sure what to do. So I saw Waffle Time's Infernum playthrough, and I saw he was using a summon called the Caustic Staff, which was a mini dragon that had low DPS, but gave a bunch of debuffs to enemies. He was also using the Shellfish and plenty of flasks, which I was not doing. So after crafting a Caustic Staff and grabbing some flasks, I went and fought the twins again when it turned nighttime. And I did so much damage, I was actually able to get Spasmatism to 29% health. And after that, I summoned the twins for one last time, and we finally beat them. And with all the debuffs we had combined, we were dealing crazy damage.
Let's go!
The next night, I summoned Skeletron Prime, and this boss was so difficult. It was honestly just so hard to dodge all of his projectiles, and I just couldn't beat him. I started the next day by buying Forbidden Fragments, and using those and Adamantite bars, I was able to craft Forbidden Armor. The next night was all spent on Skeletron Prime, and I just kept losing over and over and over again. I spent the rest of the next day taking down my old house and making a new little castle for NPCs. And when it turned night, I fought Skeletron Prime again, and I actually had a really good run, but halfway during the fight, he summons the Destroyer, and both of them combined was honestly too much, so I ended up dying. The next day was all spent on the castle, and honestly, I'm really happy how it turned out. The next day while I was at my base, I got a message saying that the Goblin Army was approaching. And while doing the event, I got an accessory called the First Shadow Flame, which gave me an extra minion slot and made my minions inflict Shadow Flame. Now the next 4 days were all spent fighting Skeletron Prime, and I was not lying when I said he was difficult. And honestly, I feel like he was really poorly designed. I hated this fight so much. And here's a quick montage of my deaths. And at this point, my sanity had been completely drained. The next 2 nights were still spent on Skeletron Prime, but on the second night, I gave an attempt at Calamitous Clone. And surprisingly, I got him to 42% health first try. I spent the next day farming the Brimstone Elemental for a cosmetic, and when it turned nighttime, I fought the Calamitous Clone again, and I got her to 10% health. But unfortunately, I died in the dodging phase, so I knew I can kill her now. It was just only a matter of attempts. And the next night, we summoned the Calamitous Clone for one last time, and this is what happened. talking.
Please, please, please. I'm insane. I'm insane. I'm insane. And I broke my things. I'm drooling that rage. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. 2%, 2%, 2%. Third try!
And with the Calamitous clone dead, we have now officially completed our goal. So 24 days left, we'll see how far we can progress. I first started by opening up her treasure bag, and I got a new summon called Entropy's Vigil, which summoned a mini Calamitous clone and the brothers. I also got an accessory called Void of Calamity, which gave a 12% increase to all damage and rained down brimstone fire when you got hit. And also the new summons we got were crazy. Also, killing the Calamitous clone gave us a new material called Ashes of Calamity. And using those, we were able to make a new whip called the Lash of Languish. I spent the next night fighting Skeletron Prime, and even with all these new upgrades, I still couldn't kill him. But I was doing so much damage. So honestly, it was just a matter of attempts until I killed him. I then went to the jungle and started working on an arena for Plant Terra. Since I was struggling so much with Skeletron Prime, I figured the only way we could progress was through Plant Terra. And on my first attempt, I got her to 25% health, so I knew I could kill her. But with all the new changes Revengeance mode adds, this boss was a lot harder. After this, I spent the next few days going back and forth with Skeletron Prime and Plant Terra, and I didn't have any luck in killing them. But eventually, I killed Plant Terra, and this changed everything. The fight starts off with Plant Terra shooting tons of projectiles at the player. She also spawns a bunch of pink orbs around the arena, making it really hard to dodge. And not only that, she also spawns in these flowers that shoot even more projectiles. And when she's about 70% health, she starts shooting out green orbs too. Once we finally get her to half HP, she starts shooting out clusters of flowers, kind of like a shotgun. And randomly, she'll start dashing at the player, releasing even more green orbs to dodge. And the main strat I had for this fight was just circling around Plant Terra, and also trying my absolute best to dodge every single projectile she threw at me. And eventually, she goes down. And upon killing her, we get 3 new messages saying energized plant matter has formed in the underground and the desert sand shifts intensely. The first message basically means that a plague has been brought upon the jungle, meaning that now new enemies will spawn and drop new items. And the second message means that when you kill 10 sand sharks, a great sand shark mini boss will spawn. And before I forget, here's her lore item. And from her treasure bag, we got this new material called Living Shards. Also, now that we killed Plant Terra, a new ore spawned in called Perennial Ore. I then went to the dungeon to farm for ectoplasm, and after returning home, I made a pair of Master Ninja gear. I also forgot to mention, but at some point in the dungeon, I found the Morningstar Whip, which was a huge increase in damage. And using our ectoplasm, I made a core of Sunlight, Havoc, and Ellium to make a core of Calamity. I also made the Pumpkin Moon Medallion. And later that night, I did the Pumpkin Moon event so I can get Spooky Wood. And using the Spooky Wood, I was able to make Spooky Armor. I also got a new pet, a new mount, and a Necromantic Scroll, which gave an extra minion slot and 10% increased summon damage. I then made a spooky helmet and a spooky chest plate, but I didn't have enough to make the leggings. I then made a house in the jungle for the witch doctor to move in, and when he moved in, I bought the Hercules beetle, which gave a 15% increase to summon damage. And combining that with the necromantic scroll, I was able to make the papyrus scarab, which gave an extra minion slot and 15% increase to summon damage. After that, we did the pumpkin moon event again so we can get the full set of spooky armor and spooky wings. And this is my favorite looking armor set in the base game. It also gave a 25% increase to summon damage. And after combining a pygmy necklace, 5 cores of sunlight, a papyrus scroll, a summoner emblem, and 30 holy water, I was able to make the status blessing, which gave 2 extra minion slots and increased my summon damage by 12%. After a couple more deaths to Skeletron Prime, I decided to go to the jungle to fight Golem, and bro completely clapped my cheeks. While I was in the jungle, I killed an enemy that dropped perennial ore, so I turned that into perennial bars and made a bestial pickaxe. And later that night, I summoned Skeletron Prime for the final time. After so many attempts, we finally killed him. The fight starts off with him chasing the player, and this time he has 2 heads instead of 1. Once you get him low enough, he summons in the Destroyer. And honestly, this is just ridiculous. I honestly hate the design of this boss. I think that they could have done way better and not have to summon in all the other mechs just to make it difficult. But eventually later into the fight, he summons the twins as well, which is not any easier. And after 66 attempts, we killed him. And here's my reaction.
Finally!
After heading back home, I upgraded our Terror Spark boots into Angel Treads. I also made a full set of hollowed armor, but the spooky armor we had was better. Alright guys, we're now in the last 14 days of the video. Just bear with me guys, we're so close to finishing. I hope you guys have enjoyed so far. I know I certainly have. And without wasting any more time, let's get through this. I went to the cave to start mining for some perennial ore, and I found so much hollowed ore, meaning that I wasted almost 3 platinum earlier to make this hollowed armor that I didn't even use in the first place. I did end up finding loads of perennial ore though. After that, I went to the ocean and killed this enemy called Question Mark, and after killing it, it spawned in our next boss, Anahita and the Leviathan, and this is one of my favorite fights in the entire game. I ended up dying pretty early on in the fight because I wasn't familiar with it, but on my second try, I did way better. Matter of fact, I did so good, on my second attempt, I got the boss to 0.1% health and died. Yep, I actually could have not tried to do this. This is honestly harder to do than killing the boss itself. And after a few more tries, I eventually killed him, and I let the fight play out. From our treasure bag, we got a new whip called the Siren Serenity, which gave a ton of buffs. After that, I went to the Astrus altar and tried an attempt at Astrum Dias, and surprisingly, I actually did really well. Also, just saying, I confused this with Astrum Aureus. I thought we had to fight this boss, and this guy is actually meant to be fought right before Moonlord. I did give him another attempt, but sadly I failed. I then spent the last few days farming Anahita and the Leviathan. I don't remember exactly what it was. I'm pretty sure it was for a summon or something, but all I know is that we were farming them. After that, we flew around our base and admired the creation we had made. And with that, everyone, that was 100 days of Terraria Calamity. Now before we click off this video, I'd like to talk a little bit about myself and about this channel. Terraria is easily my favorite game of all time, and I plan to make many more videos on this. If this video reaches 100 likes, I will do a 200 days video, because I know that you guys will like it, but you have to show me, you have to like the video. And also, I know you hear this 100,000 times every day, but if you can subscribe, it means the absolute world to me. Doing YouTube has always been my dream since I was a little kid, and it's only possible through you guys. And anyone who already has subscribed and liked the video, or even commented, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you all for watching, and have a blessed day.